All right, let's get right into a really fascinating and frankly huge legal case from Ghana, re Akoto. Now, at its heart, this is the classic showdown, right? It's state security on one side and individual liberty on the other. And really, it all comes down to this one massive question, one that pretty much every democracy has to wrestle with. Can a government just detain its own citizens without giving them a trial, all in the name of state security? Well, let's see exactly how Ghana's Supreme Court answered that question way back in 1961.
So to understand this, you have to picture this scene. It's Ghana, 1959. The country is brand new, only 2 years into its independence. And for the government, things felt, well, fragile. The main goal was building one unified nation, and there was this very real fear that any strong political opposition could just shatter the whole project. And it's this backdrop that gives us the law that's at the center of our story.
And this law, the Preventive Detention Act, it was incredibly powerful. I mean, think about it. It gave the head of state the power to lock someone up for 5 years. No judge, no jury, no trial. The only thing required was for the Governor General to be satisfied that it was necessary for state security. That's it. And it didn't stay on the books for long before it was put to use. In November of 1959, an order went out, and just like that, 8 men were arrested. The order said they were to be detained for the full 5 years. Now, it's so important to remember, these weren't just names in a legal filing. These were real guys with real jobs. You had before Osei Akoto, who was a senior official for the King of the Ashanti. But then you also had a lorry driver, a storekeeper, an auctioneer, just regular people who suddenly found themselves at the center of this huge legal fight.
But you know, they didn't just take this lying down. The detainees decided to fight back. And they used one of the oldest and most powerful tools in the legal playbook to do it, kicking off a case that would climb all the way to Ghana's Supreme Court.
What they did was file for a writ of habeas corpus. You've probably heard the term. It's Latin for produce the body, and it's a cornerstone of the legal system. It's basically a demand you can make to the government saying you have to bring this person to court and prove to a judge that you're holding them legally. It's the ultimate defense against being locked up without a good reason.
So their legal team, which was led by the very famous Dr. J.B. Dankwa, came at the government with a three-pronged attack. First, they said the court couldn't just accept the government's reasons at face value, it had to actually check if those reasons were true. Second, they flat out accused the Minister of the Interior of acting in bad faith with malice. And third, and this was the big one, they argued the whole law itself was unconstitutional.
So yeah, the stage was set for a truly landmark decision. How is the Supreme Court going to handle this direct challenge to the authority of the brand new government?
Well, on that first point about investigating the facts, the court sided entirely with the government. It said the Governor General had what's called plenary discretion. That's a fancy legal term for having pretty much absolute authority. So the court's job wasn't to ask if the men were really a danger, but basically just to check if the government had filled out the paperwork correctly. Okay, so what about that accusation of malice? The court threw that out too. It said that you have to start with the assumption that high-ranking government officials are acting in good faith, and if you want to prove otherwise, you need positive evidence, which is a really, really high bar to clear. And then came the final knockout blow. The detainees argued that the whole act went against the president's own sworn oath in the Constitution to protect people's fundamental rights. But the court's answer was a firm no. They ruled that the president's declaration was not the same thing as a legally enforceable Bill of Rights that you could sue over.
So you have to ask, why did the court come down so hard on the side of the government? Well, the whole verdict was built on 3 really strong legal pillars that defined the balance of power in Ghana at the time. It showed a huge amount of respect for the executive branch, all in the name of national stability.
So pillar number 1, as we mentioned, was this idea of plenary discretion. Basically, the court said that once Parliament gives the president this kind of power, the courts can't step in and second-guess the decision. If the president says he's satisfied, well, that's pretty much the end of the story.
The second pillar was the power of Parliament. The court made it very clear that Ghana's Parliament was sovereign. It had the ultimate authority to pass any law it wanted, even a law this controversial, as long as it followed the rules set out in the Constitution.
And that leads us to the third pillar. And this quote from the judgment says it all. The court ruled that the president's oath in the Constitution to protect things like freedom and justice, well, that was aspirational. It was a goal, a moral obligation, not a hard and fast legal rule that the courts could actually enforce.
And to really drive this point home, the court used a brilliant analogy. It said the president's declaration was like the coronation oath of the Queen of England. It's a hugely important, solemn, moral promise, but it's not a legal contract. You can't sue the queen if you feel she's broken her oath, and the court said the same logic applied here.
So, in the end, the detainees lost their case. But the echoes of this decision would be felt for decades. So why are we still talking about Akoto all these years later? Because its legacy is massive. So let's break down what it all meant. The court essentially drew a line in the sand. When it came to a conflict, state security came first, individual liberty second. It gave a massive green light to the power of the executive, and it established that those grand promises in the Constitution, they were goals, not legally binding rights. All of this set a precedent for powerful executive rule that would shape Ghanaian law for a long, long time.
The bottom line is this. The case created a legal framework that said when the government plays the national security card, fundamental freedoms can be put on hold, and the courts can't do anything about it. And that principle, it would be argued over, fought against, and grappled with through all the new constitutions and political changes in Ghana's future. And all of this leaves us right back where we started, with that same fundamental question, but with a whole lot more context. The Akoto case is a powerful, real-world example of one country's answer. But the question itself, it's as urgent today as it was then, for any free society. Where exactly do you draw that line?